Welcome to yet another Hemlock Vale spoiler roundup. I just posted a big video covering a lot of stuff that I wasn't uploading during the reveal of, and between recording and editing that, 2 more spoiler roundups have gone live, a good dozen or so cards, and I want to talk about all of those as well, so another day, another spoiler video. As always, thank you to derbykay.com/ancientevils for the roundups and consolidating all of this into one place. It's incredibly helpful. Let's get right into it with a new Guardian event. Absolution is an X-costed event. It's a spell and blessed, emits for guts, so that's actually like relevant good icons, and it reveals 3 tokens in the bags along with X additional tokens. So you spend money to reveal more tokens. For each non-symbol token revealed, you add a bless, and for each bless token revealed, you heal 1 horror from an investigator or ally asset at your location. I mean, that's probably like at least a 50% rate of adding blesses unless that bag is filled with shit. But I'm not sure Guardians are big on spending huge amounts of money for minor gains, and adding blesses to the bag is ultimately minor gains. My overwhelming impression of this card is that this is the sort of bad bless card where if you run a bunch of stuff like this to turn on a bless archetype, you end up with a subpar deck. I don't look at this and see anything exciting. In terms of horror healing, it's unreliable. In terms of adding blesses in the bag, not only is it unreliable, not only is it only really good at the start of the game before a bunch of people put a bunch of tokens in the bag, but the huge thing is that it's not super efficient. At 3 tokens for 0, it's not adding much to the bag, and certainly not doing it reliably. And then the real killer is that spending like 3 resources to reveal 6 tokens is so much money in Guardian. There's just no way this can be good in my eyes. Maybe I'm an idiot. Committing for guts seems like the best part of this card by far, so just run guts and draw a card too, because that's the best use case for this as far as I can say. Next up we have Strong Armed, a new 1 experience skill, commits for a foot or a fist, and you can only commit it to melee or ranged assets, but it deals +1 damage. And also you can take a damage to cancel the auto fail and try again. Any number of... Look, I'm not sure Runic Axe needed the buff, but I'm sure the deck will be happy to take it. That's how I feel about this. Like, Vicious Blow is obviously great. In many circumstances, this is just better. Vicious Blow. Runic Axe did not need to be pushed any harder. It is already, in my opinion, bar none, the strongest card in the game, and getting the ability to cancel auto fails when you're committing 3 charges to 1 super action, like, it didn't even need the damage to like be potentially strong, and with the damage, this is just unambiguously great. It's a very, very good card in any Guardian that's not using a firearm. And being an 8 is available with Silence and Samson, so that's very, very relevant as well. Next up we have Confound, a 2 cost 3 experience event. It is an insight and a trick. It is a parlay. Choose an enemy at your location, test book X, where X is the chosen enemy's evade value. If you succeed, discover 2 clues at your location. Then if the chosen enemy is not elate, automatically evade it. It is not ready during the next upkeep phase. I kind of feel like if the chosen enemy is not elite, it should be like, then automatically evade it. If the chosen enemy is not elite, it does not ready during the next upkeep phase. Like, you did book to evade. It's fine to actually evade the boss when you're testing to do it. I don't know if that part needed to be non-elite, but I think they were just worried this would be like pushed as hell if Seekers could just reliably evade a boss with this, as well as getting 2 clues. The reality is Seeker just has a ton of ways to get good clue compression. They don't need to spend 3 experience and 2 resources waiting for an enemy spawn to do it. It's not actually a bad parlay. Unlike a lot of Alessandra cards, this one's in Seeker, so it's good for everyone. But as a Seeker card, it needs to be obscenely powerful to get played in decks, and I'm not quite sure it's at that power level. And Alessandra though, like, provided you have experience with this, because a lot of stuff that Alessandra's interested in does cost experience, this just seems unambiguously really good. Test book against enemy evade -2, so a lot of enemies this will be auto succeed, and on many enemies will be an easy test. Very few enemies this is going to be a more difficult test than 2. I'm assuming you're wearing fine clothes, obviously. But yeah, that's really reliable clue compression as a free action on Alessandra. Definitely worth 3 experience in her, that's for damn sure. This is the same group of cards that was going live while I was editing the previous video, so Stir the Pot I've already covered. And I also covered Snitch. It was the reason I stopped during editing to add those to the video, because Snitch is insane. I'm going to cover it again very briefly. This is Alessandra only Shutterlight, and it's completely insane, and she comes with a built-in way to recur it with the neutral recursion card for parlays. Very insane card. Next up we have the Scrimshaw Charm. It's a 1 cost rogue asset that takes up the accessory slot. It's an item, charm, cursed. Action, add 1 to 3 blessed tokens to the chaos bag and exhaust Scrimshaw Charm. Gain 1 resource for each token added, gain 1 additional resource. Look, you can use this as emergency cash forever, but you get to add curses to the bag. However, adding curses to the bag isn't actually good. The good curse cards are ones like Faustian Bargain, Reestrad, Deep Knowledge, things that do a lot of work in exchange for putting curses in the bag. This is how you make a curse deck suck. Don't do this. That's my whole opinion. There are so many good ways to make money in Rogue. There are so many good accessories. I mean, they're all named Lucky Cigarette Case, but there's probably other ones. Like, there's so many reasons not to play this, and the actual payoff for it, it's just like, find a better, any other way to put curses in the bag. Don't do this. And also, unless you're doing this multiple times, the efficiency of it's garbage, right? 2 actions to put 3 curses in the bag and gain 2 resources because you had to pay for this. You have to use this a second time for it to even seem remotely good. And at that point, we're talking about like 6 curses for 6 resource tokens and 3 actions. It's so inefficient. Don't do this. This is not good. What is good is the upgraded Vamp. It's a 1 cost, 3 experience event. There are 2 major changes for this. First of all, you choose an enemy at your location and parlay any number of skills. So you don't pick one anymore. Then, 1 at a time in any order, you test each chosen skill difficulty 2. Not 3 anymore. For each test, if you succeeded, then it's the same effects as previously. Remove a doom, discover a clue, auto evade, move it if it's not elite, deal 2 damage. The difference is, these are difficulty 0 with fine clothes. This is ridiculously useful. This is just like, you know, do all of these, guaranteed. Now, admittedly, with deal 2 damage, auto evade, and remove a doom, that's a little bit narrow, but it's still guaranteed 1 cost event, discover a clue with other things you can do as a free action in Alessandra. Against a boss, this is guaranteed auto evade, deal 2 damage. This is just really obscenely good. Also, it's a guaranteed way to trigger your Parlay Shuttlite with Snitch. This is just good. This is really good. Alessandra has so much experience she wants to spend. I'm glad I've already committed to Karen Zobel in every single rogue. Even one further, I'm committed to In the Thick of It Karen Zobel in every single rogue, because apparently I'll be needing the experience in this character. We've also got the deck building rules for Hank Sampson, which I will not be covering now, but are on the screen if you are interested. Tomorrow, or at least sometime soon, I'm going to be posting a speculation video about Hank Sampson, and I'll get into the nitty-gritty game theory reasons why I think Survivor weapons really hold back Survivor fighters, and whether or not I think his deck building rules of innate and spirit cards are enough to help him get over that and find the action compression he needs to really be a top tier fighter and not just a good one. Next up, we have Survival Technique. It is a 2 cost, 2 experience asset, talent, and science, which does mean that this can be used in Kate Winthrop. I'm not seeing what it combos with in Kate Winthrop at a glance. I didn't realize this was a science. It doesn't look like much of one to me. It feels like a science in air quotes. It's very folksy science, but okay. The obvious thing for this is it's a lightning bolt. Choose a card you own that's attached to your location and exhaust Survival Technique. Add that card to your hand. Oh. Add it to your hand. I thought this was for pitchforks. It's not. If you have to replay the pitchfork, that's worse than just picking it up. Every time I've read this card, and every time my table has talked about this card, we just like completely misread this little bit of what the card actually does. 1 second, I'm gonna go mean to them on Discord. Before, I thought this was a gimmicky thing that made Pitchfork kind of alright. I didn't really want to invest a 2 experience card and a 2nd required card into making Pitchfork genuinely good, but I was like, oh cool, it's an experience janky way for Survivor to make Pitchfork usable twice a turn. That is the sort of thing I can get behind as like the subpar Survivor weapon design space. That's not what the card does. To quote my Discord, then what does it do? So, I thought this card was only made to pick up pitchforks. Yeah, my Discord's having a time with this. Anyway, as Derby K mentions, there's jank stuff outside of Survivor. This is really good with Breach the Door and Daniela. Skeleton Key, instead of picking it up, you just take it back with this as a lightning bolt, then you replay it as fast. So you only need to attach it for 1 action instead of picking it up and attaching it for 2 actions. There's things with this that exist. I'm not interested in any of them. Like, I'm just gonna stop myself there. I'm not gonna speculate further about the card. I'll come down to a bigger view and like let you read this if you're interested in like an actual analysis of the card. I usually don't read these. I actually had to stop and read them before I gave my take on this, because I was like, what does it do? My brain was so broken by not Pitchfork that I couldn't handle it. But like, I'm just not interested in this card anymore. It's like, oh, I can do jank combos in Survivor to recurse shit? You don't say. I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I'm interested in adding economy tax onto Survivor that usually just doesn't run cards that cost anything as their solution to economy. I'm not interested in spending experience on very specific combos. This is obviously the second part super scenario dependent. If you're in a scenario, or more accurately in a campaign, where there is regularly a way to trigger the effect during a skill test on a location or on a treachery attach your location exhaust survival technique, you get +2 skill value. Words are hard. You get +2 skill value for this test. Like, if you can regularly trigger that, the card's just obviously very good. It's just recursive, unexpected courage. And I think that's a really strong effect without any conditions. But you have to be in a scenario that's allowing that, and for this to be good in a campaign, you have to be triggering that sort of scenario over and over again. On the whole, I just find myself aggressively not interested in this card. Like, I'm sure there's cool stuff you can do with it. The idea of breaching the door repeatedly on Danielle is funny. Like, I don't think I'm not interested in the card because it's bad. I just think, like, I don't want to think about it. Next up, we have the mask set. They finally revealed the other 4 masks. Sparrow Mask for Survivor was nuts, and they all follow the same general format of a 1-cost, basically slotless asset. Item charm mask, limit 1 mask per investigator. They all have uses to offerings and they replenish 1 on a condition. And they all have lightning bolt to spend an offering to get +2 to 1 of 2 stats for a skill test limit once per test. Just because it is a functionally slotless asset that is very cheap, that is going to be giving you a lot of skills because of its recursive replenishment of the offerings, these are universally good assets. Let's see how crazy each individual one is though. For the Wolf Mask, it replenishes its offerings after you engage an enemy, which for Guardians is not going to be hard at all. And then as the Lightning Bolt to spend the offering, you get +2 to Fist or Foot. Now the Fist is obviously useful if you're fighting, say, every couple of enemies you find a 5-fist enemy or something, then you use the offerings you replenished on tiny enemies to fight the big ones that you are less reliable at. If you are somebody like Sister Mary or Skids, someone who really sucks in the early scenarios, then this really helps to cover up for your 3-fist. Maybe other characters wouldn't need it, but you will absolutely crutch on this item. I will mention Vanilla Skids, not that I think you should ever play Vanilla Skids, absolutely loves this item. He's a dirty fighting character that needs the foot, and before dirty fighting is online, he desperately needs the fist. So this is like the easiest card of all time in Vanilla Skids, but I mean, that's not important. The important thing is that just for fighting, this is good. Because this is a 1-cost asset that's going to do stuff before you lose it, it is going to be a good card for insurance against, say, Crypt Shield. So whether this is just good, but you might not need it if, say, you have like 5 Fist and you're already super reliably fighting, is going to depend on the second half. How good is +2 foot? Well, in most Guardians who have bad foot, the difference in taking a test at 1 foot on Leo or 3 foot on Leo is you're probably still failing, so it's how many teammates need to commit icons for you. At 1 foot, you basically can't be saved, and at 3 foot, a manual dex gets you out, right? Wolf Mask helps you get there, but it doesn't do it on its own for all these 1 foot and 2 foot Guardians that exist. For 3 foot Guardians, like Mark Harrigan, I'm sure others have 3 foot, but I can't think of which ones they are right now. This is actually a lot better. Now you can trip at 5, now you can take your grasping hands at 5 to 3. There's a lot of value in this if your base foot is better. But for most Guardians with bad base foot, like because of Guardians being so reliable at fighting generally and so bad at foot generally, I think Wolf Mask is somewhat niche, but it's still very good. Like if it applies to your character at all, this is a very good card. Next up, we have the Mouse Mask for Seeker. The replenishment condition here is after you reveal a location or put a new location into play, and the second one's somewhat interesting. Generally, you never name anyone as lead investigator other than the main fighter, because so many campaigns have a habit of being like, hey yo, you advance the act, main investigator draws the boss. And because so many scenarios do that, you just always say lead investigator is main fighter. You just always do that. However, lead investigator is also on putting locations into play, so maybe Mouse Mask is the first card ever to challenge that. Additionally though, there is one person who puts locations into play all the time. Luke Robinson puts the gate box into play every time he uses it, giving him unlimited +2 to head or +2 to book. Obviously for characters like Ursula or Monterey, they trigger this more than other characters because they're building movement to begin with. But let's establish that like this is going to replenish relatively easily unless you're at 4 players, I think. If you're at 4 players, Seekers will sometimes just get stuck in a location while their team explores. but in 2 and 3 player, this is very easy to get more than 2 offerings out of. Also, as a Seeker, you can just, get like 3 uses out of it, replace it with the other mask because we draw on your whole deck, and then cycle the deck for another mask later if you really need the more charges. It's not efficient, but they can do it. I think you're going to be able to reliably get way more than 2 offerings out of Mouse Mask unless you're on 4 players, and especially if you're a movement-based Seeker or Luke Robinson. Now, as for the effect, what we're doing with those charges, this is just straight up higher education, like that's what it is. When I saw this card, I memed with my table that Joe Diamond's really good if you play him in like Carcosa. You completely ignore his foot stat because there are no foot treacheries in Carcosa, and you run this within the thick of it higher education, and you just pass the head test, and you build pure tempo, and you ignore building anything else for your weaknesses at all. And I'm not willing to say a character's good, because in some campaigns you don't challenge their weak stat, like Leo Anderson's also better in Carcosa. But I am willing to say it's cool how aggressively a Seeker can build to not give a shit about a head test now. Now, they're obviously already good at passing book checks. This is still helpful for, say, beating the bag on deduction level 2 against a 5-shroud location, right? Having access to this will still be relevant. Most Seekers have at least a decent head, and giving +2 to head is going to get them either in a position where they're up 2 over a Mythos test, or where it's very easy to push them to somewhere between +2 and +5 once you commit other cards to them, right? Like, I think this really does trivialize head checks a lot. It's the level 0 higher education that level 0 higher education desperately wishes it were. This is just unambiguously a good card. I have nothing else to say about it. I don't know that it sees play in Seeker when they're bottom 30 cards. Like, when you finally get down to a 30 card deck, you're cutting stuff like Working a Hunch. You're cutting stuff like if you're fitting Eureka, are you cutting Mr. Rook's Lab Assistance, Burn the Midnight Oil Shortcut? There are so many insane Seeker cards that just this effect is obviously incredible. On Expert and higher difficulties, this is even better than I view it as. Mouse Mask is very good. It's very, very good. And if Seeker weren't already so insane, I would say it was a staple card that every single Seeker should run. So let's talk about the direct parallel to the Mouse Mask, the Fox Mask for Rogues. The replenish condition here is notably worse. You need to move out of a location with an enemy. Whereas discovering clues is, or not discovering clues, revealing locations is something that is just a natural part of playing the game. Moving out of a location with an enemy, for survivors, you just needed to take damage or horror. That happens if you're playing the game. For guardians who are fighters, you need to engage an enemy. That's part of your job. For cloovers, it's revealing a location. You need to organize your team a little bit, but that's basically just part of playing the game. For rogues, this is the first of 2 masks where the condition requires you to go out of your way a little bit. It's basically the Trish play pattern. Your clover doesn't have an enemy, the fighter does. The clover says, hey, let me go first. I have a benefit by letting this enemy exist in my turn. So we know that this isn't that hard to trigger on any clover because you can just have your fighter deal with their enemy second. Additionally, there are a lot of rogues that do evade. I don't like evading, obviously, I've gone on at length, but Hellfoot doesn't really matter. However, when you are getting direct benefits for evading the enemy and leaving, it does make it more appealing. The issue is that typically evading an enemy and leaving is the worst thing you can do. If you evade a dangerous hunter enemy and walk away, you haven't solved the problem. You've set yourself up for an even more dangerous turn down the line when that enemy finally hunts to your location and you draw something else on top of it. So if you look at this as I need to dodge an enemy and walk away from it to trigger this, it's in my opinion, very, very bad. But if you look at this as I need to find ways to organize with my team so that the enemy is alive when I leave the location, but dies anyway. Or we're evading enemies, but those enemies that we're evading don't have Hunter and we're never coming back here. This is still something you can replenish probably as much as the Seeker one. It requires more thought to do it. It requires like actually planning things out a little bit more than the Seeker one does, but I don't think it's harder to do once you plan it out. And getting to the reason why I said it was the direct parallel to the Seeker Mask, it is +2 book or +2 foot. And to be clear, that is directly better than Seeker. Because yes, I am biased to think head matters more than foot, but they're both just Mythos defense stats. This is the same proactively, even if Rogue is worse at leveraging their book, and this is the same defensively, but better because Rogue has so many offensive uses for that foot. This is like the 50th asset you can put in your rogue deck that is a flex using dirty fighting, where you really value both of these stats. There are a lot of rogues where I have gone on at length saying, man, I really wish I could get foot to good number. I wish instead of evading at 6, I could evade at 7 or 8, but when you trip a guy, there's no gun, there's no machete, there's no plus on the trip action. This is a recursive way to get +2 on those trips. And that is so, so valuable. I think +2 book is obviously good. I'm not going on about it because, like, obviously in any circumstance where this matters, you're thrilled to be using it. The +2 foot is actually the crazy part of this card. I think this is one of the best support cards Foot Matters has ever seen. This is doing a lot to try to save that archetype, because that archetype has never really done anything other than live the dream that you won't draw autofail on Pilfer Recursion. And even on Pilfer Recursion, recursive +2 foot is something you desperately want so you can beat the bag on high shroud values, right? This is so, so valuable. It's the best foot pump available in Rogue, and I'm looking forward to trying out decks that I have previously viewed as just obviously gimmick decks that I didn't need to waste my time on. Because maybe, just maybe, this foot pump is enough. It's cheap, it is level 0, it is directly impactful and recursive, and if I'm not needing it, I can still use it to get clues, because just about every Foot Matters character is either a flex or a clover in the first place. Fox Mask is very, very good, and just like Dirty Fighting, the existence of Tony Morgan, which I once viewed as a curse, is pushing rogues into building the coolest power cards in the game. But like, the fact there are these power character in rogues and these unfinished archetypes like Foot Matters results in cards like Fox Mask and Dirty Fighting, where you'll see some videos where I am dour as shit and jaded and mad at Rogue, but Fox Mask actually has me genuinely hyped for them. This is a really good one. I think this looks harder than it is and it's easy to trigger, and then these are the stats you need in Rogue. You need to pass book to progress the game, you need to pass foot to do your dumb gimmicks. It's not the perfect mask for Rogue, right? The perfect mask for Rogue would have said replenish one of these offerings after you gain resources with an action, right? Like, that would have been the perfect Rogue mask, but I get not pushing big money any harder than it already is. This is still really on theme with an identity that needed the support and very powerful, and I'm glad to see it. Next up, we have our last mask, the Mystic Mask, the Cat Mask. Its replenishment condition is replenish 2 of these offerings after Doom is placed on a card with no Doom. Now, at first, I looked at this and I groaned and said, oh god, it's just shitty Doom support, because Doom is not an archetype that's ever really been that good. Just look at Marie on my most recent tier list. I think this is probably going live before that, but upcoming tier list video, Marie's not doing so hot, says a lot about my opinion on Doom archetype. However, this doesn't say a player card. When an Acolyte spawns, you replenish a charge on this. When the agenda advances and it goes to one of whatever Doom, that's the first Doom on the agenda, you get it one, right? You get so many Doom just from playing the game that this will actually randomly replenish a good few offerings over the course of a scenario. It gives +2 head, which is the only stat Mystics cared about, so that's obviously good. But +2 fist is actually the best other stat it could have given. Obviously, giving +2 foot would have been pretty good, like if it's just the Survivor Mask with different conditions. However, +2 fist, there are a lot of Mystic fight assets that use Doom and can or must use fist. So getting +2 fist actually works pretty well with, say, those Doom tomes that deal damage. I think that is the best secondary for it, and I don't like the Doom archetype, but you print shit like Cat Mask enough times and it will start to work. We need to see more cards like Cat Mask and less cards like level 4 Dowsing Rod if we want to push this archetype into viability, and considering 2 characters are invested whole hog into this archetype, I would like to see this get somewhere. Now that said, outside of Doom, this is just like 2 to 5 copies of Guts and a Mystic for 1 cost, and if that fits in your deck, you probably just run that, because at level 0, which this card is, you know, your arcade assets aren't giving you +2, +3, whatever they eventually give you when you upgrade them. So Cat Mask is going to get you there, especially in a 4-head Mystic. This is just playable for all the same reasons as the, oh, I forget the name of the customizable card the body slot arcane asset, living tattoo or something, I have no idea. For all the same reasons the customizable body slot card is playable to get a head pump, this is even better than that. So I really like Cat Mask. I wish it wasn't a Doom card because I don't like Doom, but I also realize that a designer should endeavor to make me like the Doom archetype instead of giving up on it, and I appreciate that this is doing a lot to do that. All of the masks, in my opinion, are incredible cards that are intentionally pushed as hell. I'm looking forward to playing with all of them, just full stop. I think I'm most interested in the Rogue one for the reasons I expressed when I was gushing about that mask, but they're all pretty interesting cards. Of course, there are more spoilers that aren't the masks. We have a 1-cost event in Seeker, throw the book at them. Gambit Improvised. I know there are investigators who care about that, but I don't think they'll be using this cross-class access here. It is a fight action where you choose a tome asset you control and you get +X fist for the attack, where X is the printed cost. If you succeed, you may either automatically evade the attacked enemy, or after the attack ends, you may resolve an action or lightning bolt ability on the chosen asset, ignoring its action cost, if any. So notably, this doesn't discard the book, you just smack them with the encyclopedia and go on with your life. However, this is basically deal 1 damage, evade the enemy, if your book is expensive enough or your fist is high enough to allow you to do that. Like, it's not a terrible card. I can't look at this and tell you the card is bad. You're auto-evading a boss enemy and dealing a damage to it, provided the test is actually passable, which it almost certainly is. Not that it's always gonna be passable, but you wouldn't put this in your deck if you couldn't make this passable, right? The Guardian can always just throw you overpower for an auto-evade, which is an interesting use of the card. Converting fist icons into evasion is very good. But the big thing with this is just like, if I wanted to help with fighting, there are much, much better ways to do that in Seeker, even at level 0. The main thing is this gives access to a guaranteed evade and a Seeker, and that's valuable. I don't know if I'll ever run this, but I can't look at this and say it's just a bad card. Although I do have a question. What does it mean to activate your lightning bolt ability on the chosen asset? Because again, we don't discard the book, right? So like, couldn't I have done that anyway? Like, I just do the test and then take the lightning bolt ability? Like, this doesn't ignore exhausting a card, it ignores the action cost. It has no interaction whatsoever with a lightning bolt. Like, I could have just done the lightning bolt ability. Why is this text here? What does it do? What am I missing? Next up, even as a Bob hater, I have some genuine Bob hype for Matchbox. And I'll also mention with all the masks going around, there's more items in the game and Bob stocks are going up. But let's go on to Matchbox, a 1-cost slotless asset. It has 3 supplies. It's a tool, so you get it in Wilson Riches as well, by the way. If Matchbox has no supplies, it automatically discards for recursion synergies and Survivor. And as a lightning bolt during anyone's turn, you exhaust Matchbox, spend a supply, and you give your location -1 shroud until the end of this turn. So difficulty 0, eat your heart out first of all, right? Old Keyring 3 now triggers on 3 shroud locations. Previously, when you were trying to old Keyring plus Gumption something for Shed a Light, you capped out on 4 shroud, but with Matchbox it goes up to 5 shroud. So obviously the value you get out of this in difficulty 0 is nuts. But just as a helpful plus book card, this is effectively +9 book compared to a Flashlight's +6, so it's tremendously better than Flashlight without taking up the hand slot while costing less. The biggest thing with this is that unlike a Flashlight or a Lantern, this just affects every type of investigation. You can't use a Lantern and a Flashlight, but you can use a Matchbox and a Flashlight. You are so easily triggering this for meaningful improvement to your book every single time you light a match that it's kind of nuts. It is a very good card just for the book value, and then when you apply it to difficulty 0, it gets ridiculous. So this is just a good card, anyone who can run it. Flex Wilson, Flex Yorick, I don't know if either of those are going to be super real decks, but they're both running the hell out of Matchbox. Bob is going to just view this card as an uncuttable staple forever. This is a very, very good card. And rounding us out for the day, we have a basic weakness, the Silver Moth. It is an accessory slot asset where when you draw it, you must either put it into play in your threat area, effectively discarding your asset, or take 1 horror and shuffle it into your deck. It cannot leave play except by the double action below, which is just discard the card, and while it's in play, you get -1 sanity. Like, obviously there are characters that have Lucky Cigarette Case 3 and they hate this. Obviously there are a couple of characters with like 5 sanity, and even -1 sanity on them is a little bit sketchy, and taking horror to have that not happen for a little bit is not exactly a solution for them either. However, for the vast majority of characters, this is just soft as hell, right? Like if I'm playing a Seeker that doesn't even run an accessory slot card, I'm like, oh no, my basic weakness gave me -1 sanity. Anyways, there are so many characters that just don't even view this as a weakness, and on the ones where it is a problem, it's not like the biggest problem. It's a 2-action tax. You will have to consider like where you play your cards in, but realistically, that just forces you to upgrade Relic Hunter early, I think, which is annoying to be sure, but not a super harsh weakness. I think that at some point during testing, this was -2 sanity, and it was just like killing the shit out of Mark Harrigan and Silas Marsh. And they weren't wrong to bring it down to -1, but it makes the card much less scary and much less interesting. Because as a basic weakness, it's so hard making an interesting basic weakness, right? You either print something where you draw it and your investigator literally dies, or you print something that does nothing. And it seems like it's a huge middle ground, but because investigators are so different, and there are so many different ways the same card can play out, you end up having this really difficult time making a basic weakness that is genuinely threatening but not too harsh. Also, not all weaknesses are supposed to be super harsh, that is true as well. But this is definitely very thoroughly on the softer side of weaknesses. Like unless you're playing a 4-head Mystic and then your scenario 1 gets pretty shit, but really, seriously, this is just a soft weakness and I have no strong opinion about it whatsoever. And with that, I am finally caught up on spoilers for the Hemlock Vale, and especially the Mask and the Matchbox I'm hyped about. Alessandra I'm super hyped about, but on the whole, I'm really looking forward to the next expansion, and I hope you're as hyped about it as I am. Anyways, for now, I'm done. I've been rather incoherent. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, Evan and Jeffrey B, and I'll see all of you in the next one.